Germany finds itself at a crossroads. The nation is a powerhouse of industry and innovation. Yet, it also aspires to be a leader in the fight against climate change. This duality is at the heart of Germany's recent climate deal. The government has pledged support for the EU's ambitious 2040 climate target. This target aims for a 90% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. However, Germany's support comes with conditions. These conditions have sparked debate both domestically and within the EU. Germany's stance highlights the challenges of balancing economic competitiveness with environmental responsibility. The nation's decision will have far-reaching implications. It could influence the EU's overall approach to climate action. Additionally, it raises questions about the future of global climate cooperation. Central to Germany's conditional support is the use of carbon credits. These credits are a market-based mechanism. They allow countries to offset their emissions by investing in emission reductions elsewhere. Here's how it works. A country or company reduces emissions below its target. This creates a surplus of carbon credits. These credits can then be sold to other entities struggling to meet their own targets. Proponents argue that carbon credits can accelerate global emission reductions. They provide financial incentives for investing in clean technologies, particularly in developing countries. However, critics argue that carbon credits can allow developed nations to avoid making difficult domestic reductions. There are also concerns about the transparency and effectiveness of some carbon credit projects. Germany's support for the EU's 2040 target hinges on three key demands. Firstly, the nation wants the flexibility to use international carbon credits. This would allow Germany to offset up to 3% of its emissions reductions target. Secondly, Germany insists on including carbon removals in the equation. This means accounting for activities like afforestation, which absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Finally, Germany seeks to cap its contribution to the EU target. Instead of adhering to the full 90% reduction, Germany aims to limit its domestic emissions cuts to 88%. These demands reflect the government's desire to balance ambitious climate goals with the protection of German industries. The use of international carbon offsets is a contentious issue. On the one hand, offsets can drive investment in clean technologies and sustainable development. They can also help engage developing nations in the global effort to combat climate change. By providing financial incentives, offsets can unlock emission reductions that might not otherwise occur. However, there are significant risks associated with relying too heavily on offsets. One concern is the potential for emissions leakage. This occurs when emissions reductions in one location lead to increased emissions elsewhere. For example, if a company offsets its emissions by investing in a reforestation project, it might inadvertently drive up demand for land, leading to deforestation in another area. Section 5. Energizing Germany's future. A delicate dance between fossil fuels and renewables. Germany's energy policy is, well, another focal point of the climate debate. The country is committed to phasing out coal by the year 2038. However, the coalition government also plans to build 20 gigawatts of new gas power plants. This decision, unsurprisingly, has drawn criticism from environmental groups who argue that it undermines the transition to renewable energy. The government, on the other hand, argues that gas is a necessary bridge fuel. They believe it can provide reliable energy as the country transitions to a more sustainable energy mix. Still, critics contend that investing in new gas infrastructure risks locking Germany into a high-carbon future. They argue that really the focus should be on rapidly scaling up renewable energy sources like wind and solar power. Section 6. A green economy or industrial protectionism. Navigating Germany's dilemma. So, Germany's insistence on using carbon credits and capping its emissions reductions has, well, raised concerns about potential loopholes. Critics argue that these measures could allow Germany to achieve its climate targets on paper while outsourcing actual emission cuts to other nations. They believe this, would undermine the environmental integrity of the EU's climate goals and shift the burden of decarbonization to poorer countries. Germany, however, maintains that its commitment to climate action is unwavering. The government emphasizes that any use of carbon credits will adhere to strict standards, ensuring that emissions reductions are real, measurable, and permanent. Moreover, Germany argues that its economic strength is, honestly, essential for driving innovation and developing the technologies needed for a global transition to a low-carbon future. Section 7. Transparency and governance. Safeguarding the integrity of carbon markets. The debate surrounding carbon credits really highlights the importance of robust governance and transparency in carbon markets to ensure that offsets deliver genuine emissions reductions and avoid negative social and environmental consequences. Stringent standards and oversight mechanisms are, well, absolutely essential. This includes rigorous accounting methods, independent verification of emission reductions, and safeguards to prevent unintended negative consequences. Moreover, transparency is, crucial for building trust and accountability in carbon markets. Clear and accessible information about carbon credit projects, their methodologies, and their impacts is essential for ensuring public confidence and preventing greenwashing. Robust governance and transparency can help to mitigate the risks associated with carbon offsets and ensure that they contribute to, rather than detract from, global climate goals. Section 8. A ripple effect. Germany's potential to reshape EU climate policy. Germany's conditional support for the EU's 2040 climate target has the potential to, significantly influence the bloc's overall climate policy. As a leading economic power and a vocal advocate for climate action, Germany's stance carries significant weight within the EU. Its decision to link its support to the use of carbon credits and a cap on its emissions reductions could encourage other member states to adopt similar positions, potentially shaping the EU's negotiating position in international climate talks. Furthermore, Germany's focus on balancing economic competitiveness with environmental sustainability reflects a broader tension within the EU. As the bloc strives to achieve its ambitious climate goals, it must also address concerns about industrial competitiveness and the potential impact of climate policies on jobs and economic growth. Germany's approach highlights the need for a balanced and nuanced approach to climate action, one that considers both the urgency of reducing emissions and the economic realities of transitioning to a low-carbon future. Section 9. A turning point for Europe, the road ahead for climate action. Germany's climate deal marks a pivotal moment in the EU's journey towards a climate-neutral future. While the debate surrounding carbon credits and the balance between economic considerations and environmental ambition continues, the agreement reflects a shared commitment to addressing the climate crisis. The coming years will be, crucial for translating these commitments into concrete action. As the EU navigates the complex challenges of decarbonisation, it must find ways to reconcile competing interests and ensure a just and equitable transition for all member states. This will require continued dialogue, collaboration, and honestly, a willingness to compromise. The success of the EU's climate efforts hinges on its ability to forge a united front and demonstrate global leadership in the fight against climate change.